Anyway, I'm from Melbourne, and outside of Melbourne, in one of the bays, Western Port Bay, there's this island called French Island, and it's, not many people in Melbourne go there, but to me it was like this weirdo island. Even when I went there, it was like a weirdo island because, it has a tiny little community, and there used to be some prisons on the island, and I guess it was almost like some kind of convict colony at some point. But anyway, my sort of hills have eyes addled mind went there and immediately was thinking it's an island of freaks. It's an island of, people who look like Michael Berryman, and they're all over the island, and they're a threat. Of course they weren't. I went there with a couple of friends, my brother, my friend Richard, and I think Richard had a friend of his father's who had some ferry over to the island. There was even ferry drama going on. There was like some ferry wars, two different ferries that were competing for business to take people to the Freak Island, okay? So I don't know why anybody would be competing for business to get on the Freak Island because almost no one's there. The good thing is you could go there and you could explore some of the old prisons and the old prison cells. And I think at one point I even went there and I spent the night there. I don't quite remember when it was. I also spent the night on something else too called the South Channel Marker, which was in Port Phillip Bay in Melbourne. Anyway, I'm explaining in a way. I did a project, a movie called Marauders, which is this. It's it's like the first movie I ever made, Marauders. It was on DVD, came out in the US through a company called Subversive Cinema as part of a box set. Anyway, that was the first feature that I made. But the inspiration for it was actually going to French Island and loving it there and thinking we're going to come back and make a movie here because there's a lot of story possibilities on this island. Like there could be freaks and there could be, as I said, kind of lost Sawney Bean kind of people there. And as I said, Michael Berryman's, entire clans of Michael Berrymans. And also the other influence on this film, something that I absolutely loved was the movie Death Weekend, which is this. Also known as The House by the Lake, directed by William Fruitt. And it's absolutely one of my favourite movies of all time. This is technically a Blu-ray, but I think it's a pirated Blu-ray and it's from, I think it's Austria or something. Even though it's got like Lionsgate written on the back of it, I don't think it's any kind of official Lionsgate release, even though I think Lionsgate have the rights to it. And why the hell, Lionsgate, aren't you releasing this movie? Because it's a masterpiece and always has been. I first saw that when I was about 18, my first trip to Detroit. And I went to a drive-in, the Bel Air Drive-in in Detroit. And I saw it, and also I was seeing this for the first time as well, Last House on the Left. So the double was Last House on the Left and House by the Lake. And oh my God, I was just blown away. I saw it at in the winter at the Bel Air Drive-in. I was the only car at the drive-in. And they used to show the main movie, which I think in this case was Last House, was like another re-release of Last House. I never saw it in Australia because it was banned. So I saw Last House and then on with it was The House by the Lake. And as I said, I was the only person at the drive-in. I went there, the Bel Air Drive-in, and I remember when the movie finished, I realised that the tradition was that the first movie would be on again. And now when I think about it, I actually think the first movie was House by the Lake, then it was Last House, and then it was House by the Lake again. And I stayed for it. I remember they came and knocked on my window when I was in the car on my own and said, "Excuse me, sir, you realise the movie's over?" And I said, yeah, no, but I'm staying for the re-screening of it. And I remember they were kind of pissed off at me because they wanted to go home because it was blizzard. It was January in Detroit, and even the snow was like piled up on the hood, the bonnet of the car. So I stayed for the second screening of The House by the Lake. Now, something that was amazing about House by the Lake starred Don Stroud, Brenda Vaccaro. But what I loved was the language in the movie. It was the first time I'd ever heard anybody say something like, and I'm going to abbreviate it here because I don't want to, make the movie, make this piece like impossible to put on YouTube. But it was GDFNC. Don Stroud called Brenda Vaccaro that when she runs him off the road after they threatened her. And he said it with such strength and such authenticity and such purpose that I really appreciated that movie. The other thing with this movie is that it's incredibly well made. Like, I'm sure it's made other movies. And what's interesting, that the film is also produced by Mr. Ghostbusters, Ivan Reitman. Now, he's Canadian, and of course Fruitt was too. And what's interesting is that he also was involved in a few other Canadian movies like Cannibal Girls, that type of thing. But I just love the idea that Mr. Ghostbusters was the producer on House by the Lake. And it's a really great performance also by another actor, Chuck Schumacher, who then later on I saw him turn up in Scanners, but he's got a small role in Scanners, and he plays this sleazy dentist who sort of like tells Brenda Vaccaro that there's a bunch of people getting together at his house by the lake. And that is the subtext for getting her up to the house. But of course, what he doesn't tell her is that it's all complete BS. There's no one else at the house. There's only going to be him. And he's going to spend the weekend essentially, he thinks, having sex with her and having his way with her and looking at her through a one-way mirror. Because, anyway, the film's amazing and it's so beautifully made, really beautifully scripted too. Like it really brings an artfulness to obscene dialogue. Like there's a lot of exceptionally good dialogue, and the structure is pretty similar to something like Last House, but it's better made than Last House. And it doesn't have stupid little comical interludes, which are my issues with Last House, which is why I like Hills Have Eyes a lot more than Last House, because Hills to me is like perfect, conceptually perfect, and at the same time really well directed, beautifully written, beautifully shot. The new Arrow Blu-ray of Hills is just a bloody revelation. But anyway, back to this. So that was my inspiration for my film Marauders. And on top of French Island, so French Island weirdos, I do it, there's freaks and kind of weirdos on the island, and that would come mixed with these two, it's pretty much story of these two guys who follow this couple to a location that would actually be on the island, and they want to, they essentially, of course, want to get the girl, kill the guy, and have their way. But of course, she ends up turning the tables on them, and there's your movie. But the inspiration was definitely those, and I went away to the woods when I was actually working for a company called South Pacific Video. I was working as a cameraman / director at that company, and I was staying at this area called Nuji outside of Melbourne, and I don't drink, don't smoke and stuff. I remember that the rest of the crew spent the night at this hotel, and they were all kind of like, having a good time. But I went and wrote the script for Marauders, and it was like I kind of like wrote it in a weird panic, like a panic of about 3-4 days, and not knowing that, of course, it would change dramatically. It would change dramatically. It wouldn't be exactly the same as it was. But I was combining the aspects of French Island with aspects of Last House on House by the Lake, and then at the same time also trying to make something out of it that, even though it was being shot on broadcast video, I wanted to bring a cinematic style to it, because no one at that time was making features on broadcast video, but I had access to cameras, and I guess that could be another video at some point, and maybe I'll talk about that, like how the project actually came to be. But I was very, very so impressed with Last House, with House by the Lake. Last House too, I like Last House. I like Last House just for the audacity of, and David, and obviously the lead performance is actually, Hess's performance is very good. And also the guy who was the porn director, Fred, he did a number of interesting porns as well, just shot on video porns, but some interesting ones. But Craven, The Hills Have Eyes for me, though, was Craven's absolute masterpiece. But House by the Lake, to me, William Fruitt's masterpiece. And the fact that it has never been on Blu-ray, is officially on Blu-ray, is it's an obscenity. It's an obscenity. And I wish Lionsgate would, get off their butts and put it out, and then people can see the incredible, majesty of this movie, because, it's how you really do exploitation movies. And I think for me, what it did, it showed me that you can make really good exploitation, and it doesn't have to be kind of like, it doesn't have to have shitty photography and poor framing and shakiness and all that. And I tried to bring that to Marauders, and whether I succeeded or not, obviously, not for me to decide, but I'm hoping that I at least succeeded in making it something that's, shot and made in a good way, because I was the director and DP of the movie, and the writer, but brought on some really good producers, my friend Paul, my friend Richard, and my brother Colin, who's also in the movie. But I'd like to talk about that and maybe how all that came together, maybe some other time if there's any interest in this. But French Island's interesting. If you live in Melbourne, if you're visiting Melbourne, go and visit French Island. And I'm not sure if there still has ferries going over there. But yeah, like back then, it was seriously like visiting the Mojave Desert area of California, where I go quite a bit. And again, when I go there, I always think of, again, the Hill tribe from Hills. And I think of, a bunch of, hill folk, inspired by, the Sawney Bean family, just inspired by, I sort of love that whole idea conceptually of Hills Have Eyes. I think it's one of the best concepts ever, in a low-budget movie, which was then also carried on by a writer like Jack Ketchum with his with his novel, Off Season, which is a spectacular novel. I like Ketchum a lot. But he captured the Hills Have Eyes spirit with Off Season, but the first one was definitely Hills Have Eyes, and I really felt that no one else had actually done it quite that way. And it also, contrasted the regular nuclear family with this other family, and I just love the way that it's constructed. And Craven just nails it. He nails the family differences, but also the family parallels, between the nuclear family and the Hill family. And for the rest of my life, I have always found that going out into the desert at any time, like I cannot help but thinking of, sort of Michael Berryman looking type people out there. And no offense to Berryman, because I have had some dealings with Mr. Berryman. He's a lovely guy. And that type of character, I love always, even when I drive to Vegas on the 15, I always love looking out at the hills, and I love imagining that like maybe 2 or 3 miles off the road, there's families living out there, and they're, living off tourists, they're cannibals, and I just love that concept that they're out there, and like to explore that. I also thought that the Alexandra Aja remake of Hills was also very good. I thought that was actually, he, did a good job, some good respect. But the first Hills has just got a organic sort of grittiness to it, which I loved. So anyway, I know this particular chat was more about the inspiration from a film Marauders, which was House by the Lake and French Island. But I find that's, we want to tell stories because of our own experiences. We're also telling stories from the films that we see, and it all kind of starts meshing together. And then eventually you get to a point where you're going, okay, well, I've got some of the reality. I've got also, it all becomes, everything kind of gets synthesized into something that you make. So maybe next time, or if I do a few more of these, I'll talk about more how Marauders came to be in terms of then the financial aspects of the movie and pulling the team together.